Sometimes I would lay in the garden and I would pretend that I was a carrot. Sometimes I would curl under the leaves and I became a head of lettuce. Sometimes I would bury my soft paws in the softer earth and I was a rabbit. Sometimes in the garden I was a rock. Sometimes 2 rocks, sometimes becoming 3 rocks. Sometimes in the garden as a rock I was picked up and held cool and smooth in a palm or warmed by some sun from above. Sometimes in the garden night would arrive with a full moon glowing like the skin of an orange-skinned woman in a more orange dress, and the night would use that moon to say to me, "Look, you are like how I am. And see how bright my body sometimes becomes. Sometimes I wait for spring. Always I am waiting for spring, and for my love to return like it, out of the cold and with flowers on their fingertips."
That was Anis Mojgani reciting his poem Out of the Garden at the start of a live recording of the Detour in January 2025 at the Tomorrow Theater in Portland, Oregon. From May 2020 to May 2024, Anis was the Oregon Poet Laureate. What, you might ask, is the Oregon Poet Laureate? Is that a poet crowned with leaves? Or a poet on a throne? Not literally, it isn't. The Oregon Poet Laureate is a position appointed by the governor that serves both to recognize one poet for their exemplary creative production and also to support that poet in bringing poetry and related activities to people in all corners of Oregon. Oregon's current Poet Laureate is Ellen Waterston, and previous laureates include Kim Stafford, Elizabeth Woody, Peter Sears, Paulanne Peterson, Lawson Inada, and William Stafford, among others. There's also a national Poet Laureate, currently Ada Limon, and sometimes there are Poet Laureates of cities and towns, too. But this episode is not intended to be a treatise on the position of Poet Laureate. Instead, we explore the relationship between poetry and politics, and we thought it would make sense to talk with Anis about his sense of this relationship because the position of Poet Laureate necessarily represents an interesting and complicated mix of politics and poetry. Maybe it's worth saying that politics and poetry often don't mix, or mix only at unusual times, brief appearances at inaugurations, for example, or in combustible ways. Poet criticizes politician, say, or politician censors poet. Because Anis became Oregon Poet Laureate about 5 years ago, which was quite a political moment in Oregon and the nation, and because he is no longer in that officially nominated and state-funded political poetic position, but has returned to poetry as a civilian, we wanted to understand the connection between politics and poetry as Anis sees it. We start by looking back at Anis's first months in the role. So if I think back to May of 2020,
Yeah.
I hear some laughter starting.
Laughter and misery.
May of 2020 and the summer of 2020 in Portland, in Oregon, and in this country,
Yeah.
it was hot. That's when you started in May of 2020.
Yep.
There was tumult of all kinds, a lot of political tumult, among other things. And you were the new Poet Laureate.
Yeah. For me, I remember, when the George Floyd responses started popping off, I felt very broken inside of me. And I'd go into the garage of the house that was home and try to do work. And that work was largely trying to make sense of this country's obsession with hunting down Black people. That was a thing that was bringing up a multitude of different conversations inside of myself as a person of African descent who does not present Black, resurfacing conversations of what is my relationship to action and conversation and reflection about this. What are the ways in which for me to engage with this? with myself and to the communities around me. And also just like as an artist, as a Black American, like what is the response inside of my heart? And so at that juncture, I think that there was definitely a want in me and a need, as in many of us, to speak. And I think it was definitely like weird for me, like in this new role of what am I allowed to do? What am I not allowed to do? Also, like, what does that matter? Is this a thing that will keep me from responding in the way that I would have responded in May of 2019 to something? And so that was something that I was like trying to figure out, definitely.
The poem that you started us with tonight, as I heard it and as I've read it, is not on its face a political poem,
Right.
on its face. And I've had the good fortune in preparation for this to spend a lot of time reading and listening to and watching your poems, your poetry. And even in May of 2020, I remember reading and listening to your poetry and then going occasionally to your Twitter feed.
They're very different on one level.
And that's what I wanted to. It
Yeah.
felt to me like you were doing some very deliberate sorting between this is what I'm doing in my poetry, this is what the Twitter page is for. And that felt more political. So I wanted to ask if that was deliberate and what you were thinking in sorting between those.
I think it's a deliberate engagement, in that with Twitter, in spite of its current position and trajectory, it has been a tremendously important thing to global society. On very small levels, that it just simply provides a space that anyone can interact with anyone. And there's definitely like a lot of really harmful things that come as a result of that. But there's also really, really bountiful gifts. But on large levels that I'm not a person who travels physically between different timelines and spatial realities. So I don't know for certain, but I do not think that the Arab Spring could have happened, at least not the way that it did, without a platform like Twitter. For me, Twitter has always been a place to explore what are the ways in which I'm able to engage with this thing from a poetic standpoint with regards to like, here's this thing that says you are only allowed 140 characters to disseminate something to the world. And as a person who pontificates far more than I desire to at times inside of my head versus what is coming out of my mouth, like right now, that was like a beautiful thing to say to myself, like, ooh, let's see what are the ways we can carve and craft things to put into the world, both from a poetic standpoint and a humorous standpoint. But also that like Twitter was a place that provided me an arena to grow spiritually and to grow under realms of learning, becoming more expansive with realms and ideas of justice. And so Twitter to me has always sat as a very sizable political tool. My relationship to writing poems and my relationship to my quote unquote politics is that there are many things in this world, as I'm sure is the same with many of you, if not all of you, that anger me. I don't know if voraciously is the word, but voraciously. And the shape that my anger is a prickly thing. It is a thing that I am not trained in holding. The longer I hold it, the more I fear I will hurt myself or other people. And so I am tasked, whether that is like being taught by myself or taught by the world around me, that it is best to like disseminate my anger away and put it down. Writing definitely is a tool that aids in that. Writing is a tool that for me processes my emotions. It ultimately then means that if my relationship to my anger is one in which I'm seeking to put it down as quickly as possible, my poems aren't able to like carry that anger. If there's something that I am angry about, I desire to know how to use my anger to be of use. And if the poem's purpose for me is often to like reckon with letting emotion go, then that's in conflict with each other. And so Twitter definitely provides a space where I'm able to just sort of say whatever I desire to say.
Including the more explicitly political things
Yeah.
and the things that maybe express voracious anger right then.
Right.
You just used the phrase "to be of use," which is, of course, the title of a famous poem. And it makes me want to ask if, as we're talking about what poetry is for and what Twitter may be for and what other forms of expression are for, is there a poem in your head?
You know, with what we were talking about just now, about that time, May of 2020, and what the relationship traditionally is for me between me and my poems. I'd forgotten about this poem, and then earlier today when I was like going through stuff, I was like, oh, what should I bring tonight? And this was one that I brought. It's a poem that is not political. Is there somebody you love? Someone who loves you? What if they called out your name? Called out for you to come? Because they were in pain? Because they knew they were going to die? They knew a man was killing them? If they called for you and you could not be there, what would you do after they were gone? After they had been taken, and the ones who had taken them had stood still on your beloved's neck, or back, or chest, or soul, or people, or love, or life, or name, or skull, or heart, or body, or breath, or spirit, or beauty of simple being, and pushed until all of it was gone. And everything in the killing field stillness of a body that the killing man's body had become or always had been beneath this white flag sky of a country that has constantly and always surrendered its ideals to its cavalier hunger, the hand of the killing man in his pocket with an unchanging face, as if turning a nickel over in the lint while escaping another man's life from under his bent knee. What if all this was there to be seen on a video, in a picture, a tweet, snuffed into a loop, and had assuredly been laughed towards by some, rewound even to giggle at and repeat, your beloved, and this senseless person pressing down on the neck of your beloved, kissing their face with concrete, grabbing fields of your beloved's hair by the fistful for speaking, for drawing, a gun on them playing, a gun for jogging because she was sleeping, fingers kissing triggers like these killing men were sipping water, choking his heart for dancing in the cold to get warm, killing your beloved, your child, your father, your daughter, your mother, your grandmother, auntie, niece, nephew, your cousin, your uncle, your brother, your sister, your son, bright and aflame in their anguish of leaving. And if in the leaving your beloved used their last sparking breath of body to call aloud your name for you to come and save them, and you could not come and save them, tell me then, what wouldn't you burn in their name?
That was Beloved Summer. Thank you. That probably felt like a political poem to everyone in here.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, as the maker of that, did it feel political to you? And if so, what makes it political?
You know, I think about that a lot and think about that a lot over the years. As a person who writes poems that aren't considered political, while also coming largely from a community of poetry slam, spoken word, that has a very known relationship to what is considered a political poem. And, you know, I was talking with different friends a few times in recent weeks, just about language. And we were largely talking about things as connected to gender, to queerness, and about how that on one level, for me, as a person living in this world, it is very, very important to imagine a world in which we are not known by how we are defined to be. And at the same time, I do not desire a world with words that define what something is to be removed from the lexicon. It is important for me to have definition as a person, but that there's an aspect where like that definition is allowed to like grow and organically change over the course of my life. And I bring this up because it's like, I don't think that that's like a thing that's like specific just to that conversation. That yes, I want to be able to like define something as being political. And at the same time, that which we define as being political, for me, isn't actually what that is. That like largely the way that we as a society hold space for that word is as connected to politics. But to me, like something gets reduced to being political basically when it stirs something in somebody else that they don't want to think about. And so by that manner, any Black person finding joy in a country and society that seeks to deny joy from their existence, if their joy is a present reminder to somebody who thinks opposite to that, simply them enjoying a slice of pie is a political act, you know? And I think it's always important for me to remember that and like embrace that. But it's also not hard to welcome that. Like I wholeheartedly believe in that truth. But at the same time, like I desire to give space to what is anything trying to do? What is something attempting to do? A poem by June Jordan is a very different experience than a poem by Robert Frost. But I also don't want to define June Jordan as simply being a poet who wrote political poems, you know?
I have a June Jordan poem in this small pile of...
We should all have June Jordan poems existing in small piles wherever we go.
We should, but it's interesting that you said a poem by June Jordan is a very different thing than a poem by Robert Frost, because maybe in this room there is nodding at that. Yeah, big differences. But it may be that in most rooms, and maybe especially in political rooms, June Jordan and Robert Frost, they're both poets writing poems.
Exactly. You know, and like, you know, for me, the heart of a poem is that one is speaking to their experience. Like me sitting down to write this poem about things that I was feeling and thinking about with regards to the death of George Floyd. There's one part of that is seeking to communicate to other people that like, yes, everything that has been built up should be fucking destroyed. All of it. If this is like normal, if this is what we expect, if this is what happens and like we do not have a visceral reaction to vomit, tears, and blood from our bodies, you know, like, yes, everything around us should burn. 100% burn. And so seeking to communicate that, but also like to make sense of these ideas and feelings inside of me that are seeking simply to like speak to myself about whatever it is that I'm feeling and experiencing. And me experiencing grief from the multitude of people that I do not know who have been killed by powers that be, both on our soil and on other people's soil, is part of my mapped experience just as much as like me getting up in the morning and putting peanut butter on a piece of toast and making a smoothie and sitting there with KMHD on. And like both of those, while very different and offering me different parts of myself, still are asking me to engage with both those situations of experience with honor and reverence. And so like that's what the poem is seeking to do. If it's a Robert Frost poem that's very pastoral versus like Diane de Prima poem that's like telling you to stockpile gasoline and matches. They're very different poems, but they're also like seeking to do the same thing, speaking to what is humanity.
Can I ask the question that you pointed to before, and like, what is a poem trying to do and what is politics trying to do?
I mean, I don't know. Politics is like so many different things that I think politics is trying to do, you know, depending on in whose hand it's sitting.
What if I asked you figuratively to express what politics is trying to do?
You know, to me, what politics is seeking to do is to just dismantle all of us from being part of each other. That politics seeks to build distance between us. politics seeks to capitalize on the masses, the suffering of masses. That's what politics to me does, And, I think seeking to be against that then becomes a political act.
So let me ask the same question about poetry. Like, is poetry seeking deliberately to be against that? What is poetry seeking
For me,
to do?
on one level, poetry is not seeking to do anything, Like, poetry is existing around us always. I think poetry is doing something separate of me, separate of you, separate of all of us. And it's sometimes making itself known and asking us to engage with it, because ultimately, the poem is something that I am noticing in the world around me or in the world inside of myself. And there's something about it that calls to me to say, hey, with this, there is something here that I want you to know me through. And by knowing me through, even if it's just this little part of me, by you knowing this little part of me, I will know a little more of you. Mm-hmm. And that distance becomes a little more bridged.
I want to ask you about whether there's another poem in your head, either yours or someone else's, that this conversation is pointing you towards.
Not at the moment, though. I'm curious about the June Jordan poem that you have.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. That's polite of you to ask. It's called Letter to the Local Police. Dear sirs, I have been enjoying the law and order of our community throughout the past 3 months, since my wife and I, our 2 cats, and miscellaneous photographs of the 6 grandchildren belonging to our previous neighbors with whom we were very close, arrived in Saratoga Springs, which is clearly prospering under your custody. Indeed, until yesterday afternoon, and despite my vigilant casting about, I've been unable to discover a single instance of reasons for public-spirited concern, much less complaint. You may easily appreciate then how it is that I write to your office at this date with utmost regret for the lamentable circumstances that force my hand. Speaking directly to the issue of the moment, I have encountered a regular profusion of certain unidentified roses, growing to no discernible purpose, and according to no perceptible control, approximately 1/4 mile west of the Northway on the southern side. To be specific, there are practically thousands of the aforementioned abiding in perpetual near riot of wild behavior, indiscriminate coloring, and only the good Lord himself can say what diverse soliciting of promiscuous cross-fertilization. As I say, these roses, no matter what the apparent background training, tropistic tendencies, age, or color, do not demonstrate the least inclination toward categorization, specified allegiance, resolute preference, consideration of the needs of others, or any other minimal traits of decency. May I point out that I did not assiduously seek out this colony, as it were, and that these certain unidentified roses remain open to viewing even by children with or without suitable supervision. My wife asks me to append a note as regards the seasonal but nevertheless seriously licentious phenomenon of honeysuckle under the moon that one may apprehend at the corner of Nelson and Main. However, I have recommended that she undertake direct correspondence with you as regards this, yet another civic disturbance in our midst. I am confident that you will devise and pursue appropriate legal response to the roses in question. If I may aid your efforts in this respect, please do not hesitate to call me into consultation. Respectfully yours.
That's so good. So good.
Political?
100%, but also not.
Well, you said 100%, but also not.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what do you mean?
Just some poetic mumbo jumbo to say. No, it kind of speaks back to that thing that I was talking to a moment ago about how to both carry definition, into a future while also welcoming a future that relinquishes us of such. Any individual that is marked by society because of who they are, what they look like, how much money in their pocket, who they love, who loves them. Anybody that is marked by society to have societal transgressions laid upon them desires not to be categorized by those things that welcome transgressions across their body. We don't want to be known by those things. And at the same time, like, of course we want to be known by what we are. Like, we should all be fortunate enough to live in a world where, like, any one of us is able to, like, yell into a room and say, this is what I am. And everyone in that room be like, yes, this is what you are. And then somebody else getting to yell up and say, this is what I am. And everyone's saying, yes, this is what you are. And it being something that, like, is celebrated and honored versus caused to, like, separate or judge or assume. And I don't know how to arrive at that place where scientifically that doesn't seem like a possibility in the world that we live in, like the actual physical world that we live in. How does one, like, carry definition and also become without it? I don't know. That's what I think, and when I say, like, that poem 100% is a political poem and also is not. You share that poem and people laugh, myself included, and the reason why we laugh is because we all know how ridiculous the idea of, like, order trying to, like, be instilled upon that which delivers beauty to all of us. And also, there's aspects of order that we need in our lives and want in our lives. There are ways in which that's, like, the ongoing conundrum of, I think, like, being a human being, you know, that there's, like, this aspect to ourself that I believe is unseen, the interior universe, the spirit, and that spirit has to exist inside a physically material world. And the physically material world of our own selves have to engage with that which is untangible. And how does one reckon with those two things having to coexist always, you know?
First of all, I think you just said a lot, and, like,
Yes, I'm so sorry.
in a good way. In a good way. Not to apologize for it, made me think of 3 ways to think about the distinction and overlap between poetry and politics. And I don't know if any of these are right, but it's what I heard in there. One was he talked about order and beauty. And, like, if you were oversimplifying, you might go, well, politics is a little more about order, poetry is a little more about beauty. Another is you talked a little bit about the physical and the interior.
Mm-hmm.
Politics seems is a little more about the physical. Poetry seems like it's a little bit more about the interior. Then the third one, and the one that makes me want to see if there's more positive potentially in politics, is I loved what you said about looking into a room and saying, hey, like, this is me, this is who I am. And someone else saying, I see you, this is who I am. So that there's something about that pronoun, the singular, the I am sharing what's in me with you. Hopefully you can do the same with me. But I think the argument for politics, and this is present in our founding documents, is it's trying to create a we. So let me push that your way. Like, what do you see as positive about that attempt to live and create a shit, not just the I, but the we, that politics seems in all its flawed ways to be struggling towards?
I guess capital P politics is something that, like, is abhorrent to me. But small p politics, what is actually rooted in, you know, like, that's that aspect that I think you're speaking to, that politically we are seeking to try to establish some sort of world that allows all of us to live inside of. But, like, political systems aren't seeking to do that. Political systems are seeking to keep things in boxes. But, like, this idea of the we, like, of course that's, like, something that's, like, terribly important to me. Yeah. And again, I think it's, like, part of that ongoing conversation of self, of, like, that which is on the outside and that which is on the inside. That it's, like, the same thing. Like, it is so important for all of us to be able to be afforded the space, both from others and from ourselves, to be on our journey towards that which is, like, most making us whole as an individual human being. But, like, part of the reason for doing that and part of the way to do that is by, like, the fact that, like, we need each other. And there's nothing, like, wrong with needing each other. We should welcome needing each other. We should welcome wanting one another. You know, loving the we makes loving the me by me like easier. And vice versa. The more that I'm able to love myself, the greater I'm able to love the people outside of myself that I love.
As you were talking, it made me think of something that you do fairly regularly about a mile north of here, which is intermittently open a window that's about a story up from the ground and share poetry with spontaneously forming communities. And as we've been talking, I've been thinking about, like, how political is that?
To me, it feels fairly political.
Fairly, moderately political?
100% political, and also not, like, I think that there's aspects of that which is political is, dodgy in the woods. You think you know what it is, and then it's like, wait, maybe I'm something else. Oh, wait, maybe I am the thing that you thought I was. Oh, maybe I am something else. Or maybe it's just like my Gemini self wanting all the things at the same time, But like, I think it's a political act, I think, because like there's a void, a way in which that I desire to both engage with the community around me and also the way in which I desire the community around me to engage with itself. And there's perhaps like a way in which like that thing is not existing in my neighborhood, in my city, in my country, and I want it to exist because I believe that this is an important thing, not necessarily like the thing itself, but what the thing is seeking to do. And so like, because it's trying to exist inside of, a system that seeks to not have something like exist, it becomes a political act. But it also is like not a political act because I'm simply seeking to live the life that I want to live, which is one that has people being down to listen to some Yahoo say poems like, at the start of evening. Good evening, everybody. How are you? Good. Thanks for joining this evening. So my name is Anis, and this window is the window of my art studio. This is my neighborhood. This is my city, and my hope for this is, the original hope was simply being able to find new ways inside of this pandemic that we might be able to gather and experience things together, and to gather and for myself personally as an artist, finding ways to get to share my work with people in ways that I love doing such. That's still the hope, but also I think like the hope is, trying to find for all of us new ways of interaction. This is called Snow and Cardamom. What a powerful tree it was. So green, its young and becoming leaves were, and still turning greener. There were birds flying towards it. I will work to leave the tree where it was. Even if we are not there, the birds will one day arrive. It is okay if there were times we believed we did not plant it. I know your hands were there in the dirt with mine. It will one day be okay that we had to leave to wash our palms. It will one day be okay if we had to trade our arms for the soap. I know that we love the warm smell of this earth. I know the bodies we are given, and some parts of our lives are harder to carry than in other parts. It will be okay if we alone do not ever again travel through that land where in the gray and singing wind this tree sways softly. I know it sways. I know the rain falls there. I know the sun touches the dark clouds and the seasons pass through, each one visiting with the tree's quiet body for a short spell of cardamom and snow. It will be okay if never do we see what fruit still grows from its heart. I know our trees will be here a long time, longer than we or I or any of us will be. Like the light falling out the stars, soil shifting through our bones, the eternal machine of night and day keeps turning. The cherry pits split, cracking open orchards into a quietless world. And amongst the noise of their fruit falling like a gift, their shape taken over time, giving shade from the sun to any of us, whoever might need to sit and rest our heads, and in the bright light, open our eyes.
You're listening to The Detour with Anis Mojgani. That was audio from Anis's July 2023 performance of Poems at Sunset Out a Window. To hear more, check out our October 2023 conversation with Anis about the event series. I've been a few or several times. It feels like one of the most civic experiences I've ever had, but it doesn't explicitly call attention to itself as civic or political. And when I look around, I see people looking at each other in ways they often don't, and laughing together and taking a breath and looking at each other. And so it's interesting to think about how it can't help but be political.
Yeah.
It's like building the city that we would like to have, but it doesn't say this is what we're doing. We're building the city we would like to have.
I think one of the gifts of the pandemic, I think, has been that there's a way in which that all of us have been forced to address either in ourselves or the world around us, the ways in which the world does not, one, give to us the things that perhaps we need, but also like invites us to perhaps think about and envision what is the world that we want. And there's an aspect where all of us, whether we accept the invitation to or not, have been offered the opportunity to think like, either I didn't know, or I did know, but now I have proof, or like, I didn't know, but I didn't want to believe that there's aspects of this world that just like, not even that they just don't work, but like that which I thought was like a way in which the world operates was a thing that was created, you know? Policing is a thing that was created. It's not photosynthetic, you know? It's not a law of nature. It can go away and we can figure something else out. And so it's like all these things that we thought were concrete disappeared. Some of them came back. Some of them just went quiet. But like some of them have not come back. But like in that realization, I think, and I would hope that in many of us, there was a thing that suddenly said like, oh, if this world isn't what I thought it was, and the parts of it that I thought were solid have now turned to vapor, what gets to go there instead? Could it be something else? And could that something else be something that I actually like want, you know? And so I think like over these last few years, it's been wonderful to get to see the different ways in which people's imaginations have shown up to be like, this doesn't exist and I want this, so I'm going to make it. This doesn't exist and I want it. I'm going to make it, you know? And that's like a really, really beautiful thing. It doesn't even have to be like these like large things. Yes, I want a world without the tumultuous amount of injustice in it. And also like I want like really small things inside of that world.
That makes me think of the poem you started us with. And it makes me want to invite you, and I'll stall by starting with one, but I want us to transition to inviting questions from you from this microphone here, but by way of both transition and encouragement, I'll read a poem, and I think this builds right off what you were just talking about. It's a poem called There Are Birds Here by Jamal May with a dedication.
Oh.
Yeah?
I like Jamal, you know, and like I like him as a person. I like his poems, and it's just nice to hear the name of a friend from many, many, many years ago.
That's great.
Surface, so.
I'm really glad to hear that. That's beautiful. There are birds here for Detroit. There are birds here. So many birds here is what I was trying to say when they said those birds were metaphors for what is trapped between buildings and buildings. No. The birds are here to root around for bread. The girl's hands tear and toss like confetti. No, I don't mean the bread is torn like cotton. I said confetti. And no, not the confetti a tank can make of a building. I mean the confetti a boy can't stop smiling about, and no, his smile isn't much like a skeleton at all. And no, his neighborhood is not like a war zone. I'm trying to say his neighborhood is as tattered and feathered as anything else, as shadow pierced by sun and light, parted by shadow dance as anything else. But they won't stop saying how lovely the ruins, how ruined the lovely children must be in that birdless city.
There is something here that maybe is something to share. And perhaps it is cruel to share a poem about summer when we have so many months to go before we get to it. But I don't know, this idea of not even necessarily like finding joy in the mundane. I mean, there's that, but like seeking to just think about what are the things that, whether they are large or whether they are small, that we love, and how to like pepper our days with them. It's like, why squeeze lime onto a taco? Like, taco's fine without it, but there's something a little bit more, both in the taste and also the act of doing. And so it's like, what are the lime squeezes that both bring us joy and love, but also like are the lime squeezes that are kind of like building and building and building a better and greater and bigger world that we want. Sun on legs, legs on grass, bike rides, smell of food over fire, jumping into the river, careening in air, current kissing feet, wet stones and collecting them, rope swings, light dancing on the water, traveling to the farther side of a state to hear trees, traveling to the far side of the field to let the field do its work, recording your heartbeat to play through the earth, moving to follow the sun, finding the shade, the book on your chest as you sleep, sweat on parts you did not know existed, shaking hips with strangers, leaving home to hear music, faces hurt from smiling, giving over to another's mouth, another's song, ice cream hands, popsicle hands, stoop sitting, watching the sun become evening, falling in love, sticky bellies sticking, loud laughs and soft ones, learning another's quiet, your elbows crook becoming the color of night, my arms again the color of my ancestors, returning to the sound of air, holding friends in a backyard, hot sidewalks, burning your souls and worth it to not pull the shoes on, no plan but a walk to the store and then to see what happens from there, things happening while letting them happen with me inside of them as they're happening, lolling to roll from one porch to another, with no plan but smelling the jasmine in the air, jumping off the bow into the stillest part of the water, finding an island, unzipping anything, standing up crooked, whatever we might make, setting fires for the sound of it, the lines the sun writes on us, drives to the coast, your chest kissing the waves, falling asleep to ocean, after the party asleep on a couch or heading out last, the bike ride home, the gang splitting into paths like a library closed, alone with the stars and me one of them, turning onto my dark street, all the flowers knowing the sound of my voice, Jeff inside the firmament above me, birthday candles, mine and those I have loved, meeting up to do nothing, melting into time, coming out the movies cold into the warm air, the light in the leaves saying goodbye by the car, but staying past the crickets, just that we might be the thing that they gather together inside the darkness to sing to.
You're listening to The Detour with Anis Mojgani. That was his poem, Summer Approaches. Can we do this? I want to invite courageous people or not courageous people to come up to this microphone with questions for Anis.
Thank you. Hi, Anis. It's good to see you again.
Hello.
This talk made me think of this quote, and I wish I could honor the person that said it, but I unfortunately can't remember who it was. But they had said, We all long to write the poem that will stop this death, and I wonder if you felt that feeling before. I find myself as a writer feeling that often as I'm writing poetry. And if so, how you honor that feeling, knowing that that poem is yet to come.
It makes me think about these last 450, 60, 70 days of Palestinians being butchered simply because they breathe. So much of the early part of this year and of winter of 2023 was a lot of being inside of that, like as if there was like this puzzle, this equation to try to solve. Like if I can just unlock the right combination of words, all these things of which I have no power over will grind to a halt. And I think that feeling, that idea exists in lots of different ways in ongoing situations, large ones of atrocity and small ones, not even small ones of atrocity, but just of small pains. My best friend, Jeff, is someone that took his life now back in 2006. There's still this ongoing conversation that surfaces far less regularly in my life at this juncture, but it still surfaces that, like, was there something that I could have created to have halted this? And that's a thing that I think, like, we are always being faced with lots of different situations. And the unfortunate thing is that one, probably not, is the answer in most of them, But two, that's not a reason to not engage with it, because there are like so many different ways in which what the work that a poem is doing to ourselves, to others, to the world, we are not privy to. And so the purpose and the intent of why we are sitting down to create something is not always necessarily what the actual purpose of its creation is for. And we might not know what its purpose is. And to me, that's something to honor. That's something that holds beauty for me. And so that's something that aids me in continuing to show up and see what happens.
Thank you. I appreciate that so much.
Of course, thank you for your question.
My question was regarding the end of your poem, the one about George Floyd, where you say, like, if that happened to your friend, what wouldn't you burn? So how do you get out of the rage and the really, really deep emotions that, we're all experiencing right now, and like put them into poetry?
Yes, thank you for that question. Like, that's the thing that I'm still constantly trying to figure out. I think for me, the key to trying to do such, I mean, there's a couple things, but like the thing that's most important to me, because it serves me as a person, not just me as a poet, is learning how to basically carry my anger to its desired destination. That it's not something that is simply like so hot that I have to let go of, but rather that it's something that, like, it's hot because I'm holding it in the fires of a forge. And I'm like staying with it and engaging with it and shaping it with intent to do a specific thing. And if I become better at that, that serves me as a person, because we are all people with anger. And it's not that anger surfaces and goes away, but, I'm a believer that all our emotions are existing with us all the time. Anger lives inside of me. Joy lives inside of me. And so that serves me as a person being able to, like, know how to temper it and carry it. But it also serves me being able to engage with a poem that is asking for my anger. But the other thing that is easier for me and more immediate is, and this is across the board with pretty much my process in general, is that there's the first part of the writing for me, which is just putting whatever on the page. Like, I'm not concerned with what it sounds like, what it looks like, what it smells like. I just need to put it down. And there's some, like, shaping as it comes out, but there's also always a lot of, like, going away from it and returning, because whatever I felt when I was writing the poem is no longer the only steerer of the poem. And so that helps, particularly with things that I'm writing that are in response to rage. There's another part of me that will say, like, all right, rage, just sit quietly. Let's see what you've given to us and see how we might be able to shape this towards something.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
What does politics need from poetry right now? And what do poets need from politics?
The thing that poetry needs of politics is a greater knowing of the intent of what we are working on. And of course, like everyone's process, if you're a writer, is potentially very different, from any other writer. And then there are like ways in which that we overlap and whatnot. For me, my process is very much about not coming to the table with intent. As soon as I have intent at the gate, my creative power ceases to be in communion with me. Because for me, part of creativity is the discovery, the learning. And so the intent comes later. I think intent is a very important part of it. I think like poetry often is held, whether by the people that create it or whether by the people who hear the word poetry, poem, poet, is that it is this ethereal thing. Its purpose is simply to speak to things that we do not see, things that are untangible. And I believe that that's part of it. But what is the poem doing? What is the poem doing for us? What is the poem doing for us on a day-to-day basis to bring us ever closer to one another? And while there's so many aspects of the political systems and structures in this country and on this planet that like are abhorrent to me, I do believe that there are ways in which we need to establish structures that are serving us collectively, that are doing the job that we can't do as individuals. And so what are the ways that poems are able to extrapolate that intent and that structure to bring that kind of order into poetry? Vice versa, the thing that I love about a poem is that a poem invites us to honor all truths of being in existence, the large and the small, the beautiful and the ugly. I would want politics to engage more with that it is the larger faults of the way that we have structured politics and political systems in this country is that it is only looking at this lens of what is happening at the top, because it has spent so much time trying to figure out how to build this giant thing. And the way that you build this giant thing is by starting at the bottom and building small things that go up that high. And I would love, like, if that's what was taken from poetry to be put into politics, the honoring of a housefly, the honoring of a lime squeeze, not simply the honoring of oligarchy.
Thank you.
Thank you for holding community here with us tonight, Adam and Anis. Just thinking about the interplay of this conversation, very much like jazz music, trading back and forth. We're riffing off of each other. We're exploring. We have a general set idea of things that we're doing here, but it's that in the moment spark that is magical here. Question that I'd like to ask is, building off of what was brought before, really thinking about what is the public service component that you view yourself holding as poet laureate, especially here in Oregon, looking at things to come, hopefully not to come to fruition as poorly as they could be.
I don't know. There's definitely like an aspect of me and my person that desires little to no public engagement. I like sitting at my home. I like sitting at the homes of my friends, I think particularly after offering over the last 4 years so much of myself into this public space, there's this tendency in me to be like, time to reject all that was as I swing in this direction. But like, I don't know, there's also an aspect where the we is very important to me. And engagement with the public is a thing that allows me to find the ways that I can contribute to serving of arriving closer to the place that I want to live inside of, not just for myself, but for others. And it also like pushes me to expand upon aspects of myself that I desire to change and grow in certain ways, And so, I don't know, the public relation whether that's like a large public or just like a small public, is important to me. I think it's something that all of us need to find some sort of engagement towards, and that there's like lots of different ways to do such. That if there's one avenue of that feels like too not in sync with what we do, that it's important for us to like find the ways that we can be in sync. There's so many different ways for all of us to be part of that, to arrive us to where we need to get to. And so, and I'm the same way, that there's some things I'm just like, that's not a thing that I don't feel like what I have to offer is best suited to this, but maybe it is suited to this. So I'll go do this.
Thank you. Appreciate
Thank you.
that.
You do not need to be fully formed to go fully forward. How does the morning approach our waking? By what slow rose does it color us in? How does the night approach our arms? At which point do the crickets begin and the toads start to stir in their song, all while being where they were before they began? Forward, oh forward go, whether quick-heeled or in ope stillness. Forward, oh forward go, in greening leaf, in red leaf too, in orange amber glow of the end. Go forward not as pioneer, no, but forward as seedling. Go forward as guest, neither settler nor leader, nor bearer of any flag. If there is a flag in your hands, dig a hole and bury it. Gather yourself only under whatever banner ripples invisible. Burn any flag that your hands might touch, and see what might sprout then instead from those threads. May new cloth be woven by way of work, woven by limbs threaded between. Forward, oh forward go, holder of hand. Go forward, you forager of forest and fellowship, you smile igniters, you seed stirrers. What might your fists hold? What might your fists open to? Go forward here, where country becomes coast. Go forward and become water. For what is forward to an ocean? What direction is progress? Move both ways. Go forward to places you know. Learn in the back and forth of it all. Lead with what you have to offer. Lighthouse your heart when you are lost. Be quiet when your body has the floor. Do not tarry to listen to your own joy. Marry yourself to that what pulls at us unseen. Patience of action. Starling map yourself. Lead together. Be a beacon inside your own body. Be a newer knowing of a world already arrived, eternal. Collapse any edges. Build lower walls. Opposite of conquer. Be called by sunshine to warm what might need warming. Be called to invite yourself, to invite others, to invite themselves, to invite others. Apostle of shovel and outstretched vulnerability, go forward. Go forward. What new affection may brood between us when we do? We may not know where we are until we are there, and this is all right. This is okay. From here, where might we go? Thank you.
That was Forward by Anis Mojgani. Anis is a Portland-based poet and served as Oregon's 10th Poet Laureate. You can find more of Anis's work at thepianofarm.com and in our show notes at OregonHumanities.org. Thanks for listening to The Detour from Oregon Humanities. Anna McLean is our producer. Alexandra Sylvester, Karina Brisky, and Ben Waterhouse are our assistant producers. Thanks to Kyle Gilmer for additional audio engineering support. This is Adam Davis. See you next time.